to wage this air campaign until we're satisfied that we have sufficiently degraded and damaged his military capability.
NATO showed off before and after pictures as evidence Serbia has been hit hard.
Here you'll see the arrows depicting the targets, and now quite clearly you'll see those targets very effectively taken out.
But that has not stopped the ethnic cleansing in Kosovo, and probably won't until aircraft like this A-10 start hitting not just ammo dumps and headquarters buildings, but the troops that are doing the killing.
They'll feel the heat as quickly as we can apply it to them, believe me, and then hopefully we'll start seeing a difference.
The only other way to stop the killing would be to send in ground troops, and U.S. officials said again today they have no intention of doing that. Even if they did, Pentagon officials say it would take a month to move troops into Kosovo. John?
David Martin at the Pentagon, thanks. The pilot of the stealth fighter that went down was picked up by an elite search and rescue team on hot standby anytime U.S. planes fly into harm's way. Tom Fenton at the Aviano Air Base in Italy reports pilots' lives are very often in their hands. Tom?
John, well, here at the center of the operation, the pace of the aerial campaign has not been affected by the loss of the plane. Pilots here are undaunted by the loss of the stealth and relieved at the rescue of their fellow pilot.
No, look at that.
The pictures of the wreckage of the downed stealth fighter are a grim reminder of how much worse it could have been. Aboard every plane launched from Aviano tonight was a pilot with heightened awareness not only of this mission's danger, but also of the capabilities of an extraordinary unit standing by should the worst occur. The search and rescue teams have a single focus: locate downed air crew and bring them home alive. As seen in this Defense Department training video, the men are equipped with small arms, first aid gear, and electronic means to home in on the pilot's radio signals. What the video doesn't show is the extreme danger of operating behind lines in a race against the enemy to find a single man. The stakes couldn't be higher. Failure last night would have meant a captured American pilot on display, if not something far worse. Air Force Captain Scott O'Grady was rescued in a similar mission after being brought down over Bosnia in 1995.
They are the true heroes, from the rescue team especially, and then also the medical corps team that took care of me. They're just unbelievable.
The search
Effort in Gloucestershire were involved. All the planes have now returned safely. Yugoslav television has been showing what it says are pictures of explosions in Kosovo's regional capital, Pristina. NATO has denied the Serb claims that a plane was shot down. 60 NATO jets took part in the latest attacks. RAF Harriers have arrived at Gioia del Colle airfield in the south. Tornadoes are on standby on airfields in Germany, and 4 more US B-52s are due to arrive at RAF Fairford later today.
President during the 15-hour flight to Kosovo. This is the first time B-2s have been used in combat. The Air Force says the $2.2 billion Batwing bombers are nearly invisible to radar, and each was capable of dropping satellite-guided bombs on as many as 16 different targets.
The previous 2 days, on this occasion, assisted the pilots. It's thought that Serbian surface-to-air missile systems attempted to lock on to the 6 Harriers taking part. Low cloud made it harder for them to do so, and all pilots returned safely to base. It marks a clear step into what's being termed Phase 2 of this NATO offensive, and one where the British Harriers will come into their own, targeting specific Serbian tank, artillery and ground units, responsible for what NATO describes as an imminent humanitarian disaster in Kosovo. James Forlong, Sky News, at the Gioia del Colle Air Base in southern Italy.
We can't say how many are going to be in this sortie, where they're likely to go in the Balkans, and indeed when they're likely to arrive, because they don't necessarily go there in a direct line, but they sometimes head for the Adriatic and launch their cruise missiles from a kind of box that is marked on their maps.
Even additional Harrier jets arrived. The existing pilots at this southern Italian airbase were being prepared for their most dangerous mission yet. It came just ahead of the visit here by Defence Secretary George Robertson. Despite encountering the fiercest resistance so far from Serbian anti-aircraft defences, Senior officers claimed the Harriers hit a number of targets overnight and dubbed the mission a success. With extra men and equipment, they said similar missions would follow.
The fact that we've got more people and aeroplanes comes out is really a matter of enabling us to sustain that. We're just watching with interest as political events unfold, and clearly our working day will continue as it's been doing for the last 2 or 3 days, but the extra assets will enable us to contribute more than we've been doing until now.
The weather, which had prevented combat missions for the previous 2 days, on this occasion assisted the pilots. It's thought that Serbian surface-to-air missile systems attempted to lock on to the 6 Harriers taking part. Low cloud made it harder for them to do so, and all pilots returned safely to base. It marks a clear step into what's being termed Phase 2 of this NATO offensive, and one where the British Harriers will come into their own, targeting specific Serbian tank, artillery and ground units, responsible for what NATO describes as an imminent humanitarian disaster in Kosovo. James Forlong, Sky News, at the Gioia del Collo Air Base in southern Italy.
Certainly within the last hour here at RAF Fairford, we've had 4 different B-52s take off and head into the distance, although it is our belief from sources here on the ground that in fact they're not involved in a bombing mission at this stage, but in fact are returning to the United States, possibly though to collect more cruise missiles to bring in here to Fairford to arm the bombers on bombing raids.
And can you tell us any more about the landing last night? We saw the pictures earlier of a B-52 landing and all did not seem to be well.
There was certainly a problem, as was evident from the amount of activity on the ground involving the emergency services, but we've had no confirmation of exactly what the difficulty was from the US Air Force. As the pictures showed, the aircraft came in listing quite heavily to the right-hand side, quite characteristically different from all the landings that we've seen before. And as the plane touched down, although it did so, it appears in safety, it was chased by fire engines with their lights flashing, and as soon as the plane came to a halt, a man in a fireproof suit hastily ran to the underside of the plane and made an inspection. But whatever they found there seemed to satisfy them, because the alarm then quickly died down and the plane was taken away to a servicing area where engineers began to look at it. So obviously there was some sort of difficulty, whether it's perhaps suffered any damage in the air through contact with the enemy, or maybe it was a technical malfunction, we don't know. But these are in fact very old aircraft, and though constantly updated, they are subject to mechanical and technical problems.
Martin, as you say, 4 have taken off now, although you think they may have gone back to Louisiana. Do you expect, or could there be any more action? How many other B-52s are there at the base?
There are still 5 here on the ground. One does have an engine problem and is out of service, but we understand that there are 4 fully armed, fueled and serviceable aircraft which could take off more or less at any time. We also believe that there are more B-52s being brought here from America, Serbia, so the crews on board are kept relatively safe and away from the possibility of air interception or anti-aircraft fire from the ground. So this, we believe, certainly while the air war is continuing, will be an element which will be intensified.
Organizations and forces in the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. We continued our attacks against the integrated air defense systems, thus helping to protect our pilots. But as I agreed with our allies on Friday evening, the tempo of operations is getting faster, and the focus of our operations is shifting decisively towards actions against the forces implementing Milosevic's policy of repression in Kosovo and the infrastructure behind them. So far as the United Kingdom effort was concerned, last night, Royal Air Force Harrier GR-7 aircraft attacked an ammunition storage site. You will recall that this facility at Pristina stores ammunition used by the Serbian Interior Ministry Police, the MUP, who are at the forefront of Milosevic's repression campaign against the Kosovo Albanian population. I'm now going to ask Group Captain Parkinson to take you through what happened.
I've got 3 videos to show you shortly of a very successful attack last night against the Pristina weapons storage facility. The Harriers last night conducted what we call self-designating attacks. That is, each pilot and each aeroplane operated autonomously in the target area. Here, he's responsible not only for identifying the target, and launching the weapon into the basket from which it can be guided by the laser beam. But additionally, he has to locate the target with the laser designator pod and track the desired point of impact throughout the attack, so guiding the weapon onto its precise impact point. There's just about 90 seconds from when the Harrier pilot takes his weapon aiming until he successfully completes the attack. And during that time, he not only is responsible for weapon aiming, but also he has to safeguard his aeroplane and balance his many priorities. He has to be aware of attack both from the air and from the ground by missile or by AAA. Before I show you the 3 video clips, I'd like to show you a reconnaissance photograph of the target that was attacked last night. Can I have the first slide, please? This is a reconnaissance photograph of the target, and it would have been one of the photographs which the Harrier pilots would have used during their planning and target study for last night's attack. You can see in the center of the area buildings. These are used for both the processing and storing of weapons, of ammunition for a variety of weapons. I'd like to note also to the right-hand side of the target the prominent wooded feature and the wooded feature up in the top right-hand corner of the photograph. Each pilot is allocated a specific aiming point. Can I have the next slide, please? And you can see here the targets that each pilot was nominated. Can we take the next slide, please? So this, then, was the target for the first pilot. Go run the first film. We're starting about 7 or 8 miles out. You can see the pilot already has the target area centered in his screen. If you look to the right of the box in the center of the screen, you can see the prominent wooded area, and in the top right-hand corner, the wooded area which you saw from the reconnaissance photograph. This sort of picture gives the pilot enormous confidence that he has selected the right target area. You see this is a thermal imaging picture. As he runs further in, he can now break out the individual buildings, and you can see there he has selected his nominated impact point. And he'll be using the shape of the roads and the shape of the other buildings to ensure he has got the right target. The picture's jumped through 90 degrees now. This is because he's self-designating, and after he's released the weapons, he's maneuvering his aircraft, but the pod is still following the target automatically. He's tracking the target continuously while he's maneuvering away from the target, and you'll shortly see weapon impact. And there we have a very successful attack. Can I have the next slide, please? This is target 2. I've rotated the reconnaissance picture here because this is the aspect that you'll see on the film. You can see there marked target 2 is the right hand of 3 buildings, and you'll also notice off to the left these other 3 prominent buildings which will figure in the picture. Could we run the next video, please? So the weapon is already in flight here, and the pilot is designating the target. You can see the 3rd building there in the center of his aiming box, the 2 buildings off the left of it, and the distinctive other 3 buildings on the left-hand side of the picture. All that ensures that he knows he has the right target. Tracking the target as the weapon approaches impact. And another successful attack. Can I have the next slide, please? This is the target for the 3rd Harrier, and you'll remember that if you look slightly to the right of that and above it, you will see the target which was just attacked by the 2nd Harrier. We were dropping 2 bombs on each of these targets last night, and on this particular attack, one of the bombs guides accurately towards the nominated target. The other one fails to guide precisely, but impacts in the target area just to the left of the target, and you can see it's in open ground. And you'll see that clearly on the film. Can you run the film, please? Here we have our pilot has selected the right target, which you can see already in the center of his aiming box. If you look up and right from the target, you'll see the explosion. That's from the 2nd attack, and you can see that building is completely destroyed. The weapon which doesn't guide precisely impacts bottom left in this area here, and you will see it distinctly in just a few seconds. There's the one that didn't impact properly, but the second weapon guided precisely onto the target, so that target was also destroyed. Thank you.
This was a very successful
laser designator pod. It'd be carried under the centre line of one of the Harriers. He would find the targets, pick them up, lock the laser on, whereas his wingman would have paveway bombs underneath both wings, 2 1,000-pounders, and he would launch the bombs onto this person's laser marking. What we have seen in the last night is each aircraft carries a tiled pod under the centre line to designate the target. They also carry their own bombs, and they do all their own work. Now, you have to say the amount of coordination these pilots have got to do. They've got to fly the aircraft, they have got to check on things like the electronic warfare. Is someone trying to target surface-to-air missile on them? If there's any flak in the area, and we do know
Albanians. The attacks appear to have been concentrated on targets in and around Pristina, as we've seen.
Pristina is taking the full force of the attacks now, which are concentrated on Kosovo, although targets in the rest of Yugoslavia are still being hit. Sky. Residents cowered in the shelters during the raids, and daylight showed the extent of the damage. The state news agency said 3 police stations were later attacked by the KLA units in the confusion, and that 3 policemen killed. We have no independent confirmation of this. Out in the countryside, NATO's planes are seeking out troop and armor concentrations. The Russian government is today claiming that the bombing has killed 1,000 civilians and 100 military personnel. It also said that the US stealth fighter, which crashed at the weekend, was brought down by a Russian-built surface-to-air missile. Elsewhere in Yugoslavia, there's been damage to a factory in Čačak, and in Belgrade, where the air raid sirens have again been sounding today, a target near the civilian airport was hit, damaging many of the windows at the airport itself. There's partial cloud cover over the capital today, which limits but does not prevent further NATO action here. Tim Marshall, Sky News, Belgrade.
Its mission as a success. In the words of one pilot, it ran like it was on rails. Yet all those who took part were also shocked by the intensity and ferocity of anti-aircraft ground fire they encountered. A reminder, if one were needed, that Yugoslavian air defences should not be taken lightly, even though NATO losses at this stage remain relatively light. That could now change, as the aircraft based here must now be prepared for the possibility of low-level and daylight missions.
There isn't a single sortie that is flown